attending. Welcome to this meeting of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. The meeting today is open to the public, and thanks very much to members of the public, both down here who've got questions and people in the gallery for joining us today. As always, the meeting will be webcast and the recording will be made available to watch. We've got a number of questions from members of the public today, one related to the agenda and then 5 other questions from the public, and there's some supplementary questions which we'll come to shortly. Could I just ask that everyone in the room just switches off phones or puts them on silent so that they don't disturb the meeting. There's no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions from the town hall staff. I understand that some members of the public may be here to discuss or to listen to the discussion about the proposed changes to the local plan, and I just wanted to say a few words about that because I'm very grateful for people coming and joining us, and particularly those people who may also be watching online. And I thought it might be helpful at this point just to outline the process whereby members of the public will be able to have their say over the coming weeks and months ahead. If the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee, this committee, agrees to recommendations in the report today, item 11, then the report will be considered by a meeting of the full City Council on the 14th of May. If the full City Council supports the recommendations as well, then we expect a public consultation about the proposed changes to the draft plan to start on Thursday, the 29th of May. That public consultation will run for 6 weeks until Friday the 11th of July, and we would encourage all interested parties, all members of the public who are interested, to submit their comments during that period. We'll obviously make the process for commenting and details of that consultation available through the Sheffield Plan website, but also via the website Have Your Say Sheffield. Any representations that are received during that formal consultation period from the end of May through to July will be passed to the Sheffield Plan inspectors, who will then take them into account when they are examining the plan later in the year. And anyone seeking changes to the proposals will have a right to submit evidence or appear at public hearings in the autumn if they so wish. So just at this outset, just wanted to be sort of clear about the situation today and encourage people to continue to stay engaged on this topic. I'll now ask every member of the Strategy and Resources Committee in turn to introduce themselves, and then I'll ask the officers in the room to also introduce themselves for the benefit of people here, but also those who may be watching online. So just to recap, my name is Tom Hunt, I'm the leader of the Council and I'm chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, and I will go this way on my left.
Thank you. I'm Marianne Elliott, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley, substituting for Angela Argentio today.
Thanks. Douglas Johnson, Chair of Housing.
David Barker, Councillor for Richmond Ward, substituting for Abdul Kayam today.
Zahira Naz, Councillor for the Darnell Ward and Chair of the Finance Committee.
Fran Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Deputy Chair of the Committee.
Dawn Dale, Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside and Chair of Education, Children and Families.
Ben Miskell, Councillor for Park and Alberthorne Ward and Chair of the Transport Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee.
Councillor Jordan, Chair of Waste and Street Scene and Councillor for Dorn-Totley.
Curtis Crossland, Councillor for Bayton and Chair of Communities, Parks and Leisure.
Andrew Sanger, Councillor for Forward Ward, substituting for Councillor Shafak Mohammed. Councillor Martin Smith, representing Dorn-Totley Ward and also Chair of the Economic Development, Skills and Culture Committee.
Good afternoon, my name is Diane Hurst and I'm an elected member for Richmond Ward.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'll now ask the officers in attendance to introduce themselves, starting on the left, please.
Afternoon, everyone. Claire Taylor, Chief Operating Officer.
Hello, Meredith Teasdale, Strategic Director, Children.
Afternoon, Kate Josephs, Chief Executive.
Hello, David Hollis, General Counsel.
Hi, Craig Rogerson, Democratic Services.
Good afternoon, Philip Gregory, Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Hi, Kate Martin, Exec Director, City Futures.
Okay, thank you very much. And I should just take this opportunity to note that it's Alexis's last SNR committee meeting with us before she goes on to a new role. So let me take this opportunity to thank you for your service to Sheffield City Council and to the work you've done to make sure that residents are provided with good quality social care. So thank you on behalf of everybody for the work that you've done over the time with Sheffield City Council. Thank you. Right, item number 1, apologies for absence. Members have helpfully already shared that we've received apologies today from Councillor Angela Argencio, Councillor Shafat Mohammed and Councillor Abdul Qayyum, and Councillors Barker, Sanga and Elliott are substituting for them. Item 2, there are no items today that contain exempt information, so there's no need to have any items held in closed session. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest in any items of business on today's agenda? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 19th of March and are available in the public pack of papers for this committee, and members should have had sight of them. Are members happy to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting that this committee held on the 19th of March? Great, thank you very much. Item number 5, public petitions, questions and statements. A really important point in the meeting when members of the public are able to come and ask us questions on behalf of themselves and their communities. So, as mentioned, we've received 1 question today which is related to today's agenda, 5 questions which are related to the remit of this committee, and then 5 supplementary questions. Responses to the remit questions have been sent already to the questioners and they're published already on the Council's website. We'll take the agenda question first, which is from Jenny Carpenter, and then the supplementary questions. And I'll ask every questioner who is here in person to come and join us at the front of the meeting to ask their questions, and then I, on behalf of the committee, will give answers. So, on the right-hand side, Jenny, there should be a button which turns that on, he says, confidently, but perhaps not. I wonder if we could just assist with that. Hang on 1 second, we'll get that sorted.
Come on, that one. Right, we're there. Thank you. I'm Jenny Carpenter, and I asked a question about Doncaster Sheffield Airport, and this is my supplementary. In these worrying times, it is essential that we retain widespread public confidence in the dedicated, honest politicians who serve us. You heard that. Any suggestion of avoiding straight answers to questions diminishes that confidence. With this in mind, can I ask whether Councillor Hunt will insist on the Doncaster Sheffield Airport business case being made public to allow wider public scrutiny before the SYMCA decision is made? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for your question, for joining us today. And of course, I would agree that it's important that answers are given that are clear and are honest. So the answer here is that South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority does not routinely publish full business cases, and that is often due to commercial sensitivity. That does apply in the case of South Yorkshire Airport City and the full business case related to that, and that will contain commercially sensitive information. So at this stage, the answer is we don't routinely publish full business cases. There is clearly decisions to be made and deliberation that will be had, but where information can be published that is not commercially sensitive, then it will, but some, you'll understand, is commercially sensitive. So that's the answer I'm able to give you today. Thank you. Okay, so the next question on the list is from Mohammed, who I think might be running late unless they've been able to arrive shortly. So we may well come back in a moment then. There's a question then from somebody called Justine, who I know is... okay, so upstairs, so we may well come to that in a second. Question from Justine, and I think Ms. Sant is able to give the question on her behalf. Is that right? Yeah, brilliant. Do you want to come up to the front, please? So just for everyone's benefit, your name is Misanth, and you're asking a question on behalf of Justine. Do you want to answer that question, please? Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Or do you want to just press the microphone button? It's on the right-hand side. Should be on the right-hand side. There we go.
Sweet. Yeah, unfortunately, Justine couldn't be here today, so I'm asking a question on her behalf. In response, this is a supplementary question in response to her initial question, I think. And she asks, we appreciate the committee arranging a meeting with a council officer and Acorn Burngreave in the near future, and hope the key issue of the cost of the building will be addressed. Does the committee agree with community groups in the area that the building, talk about Burngreave Vestry Hall, that the building's underuse is linked with the high cost of booking?
Thank you very much. And I should say, just for the benefit of members here and also members of the public, that there's a series of questions that have been asked about the Vestry Hall in Burngreave. And so this question relates to that building, just for clarity. And so in answer to Justine's follow-up question, and the original question is just for a reminder, is already published on the website. I think it's likely that there's a range of factors that are going to contribute to why people may choose or not to choose to use that building. And as we said in the original written response, it's really important to me and to the whole of this council that community facilities are well used, that this council spends taxpayers' money wisely, and that we listen to community voices to understand the barriers to why local residents may not be able to access or choose not to access Burngreave Vestry Hall. And I'm pleased that officers of the City Council will be arranging a meeting with Acorn Burngreave, which is the group that I understand you and others are part of, so that those concerns can be further explored. Thank you. Is it Mohammed? Yes. Yeah, Mohammed, do you want to ask your supplementary question? Thank you.
I think it's on. Thank you very much for having us today and answering our response to our question. It's been, unfortunately, a long time coming. I think we've presented a few cases before, and we are very grateful for this opportunity. So in terms of your response, of course, I'm grateful for your response. We look forward to meeting with the council officers and presenting our proposal. And we are very happy to hear that this meeting will take place in the near future. Could the committee confirm that this meeting will take place in the next 8 weeks? The reasoning for our asking specifically for this confirmation is due to wouldn't necessarily say, miscommunications in the past. I think we've tried to speak to you, Mr. Hunter, yourself at one point or another, and we've of course spoken to local councils on a few occasions. Many of them, of course, have been quite forthright, and we found their responses very, very adequate and appropriate at the time for our particular cause, and we found them quite honest and appropriate. At the same time, maybe because of miscommunication, because of other matters, perhaps the time frame that was originally agreed during initial meetings sometime last year, unfortunately, didn't really come to fruition. Of course, we understand, difficulties regarding time and importance, but. Brilliant. Yes.
Thank you. So in order to give you a straight answer to the question, yes, the meeting can be scheduled within 8 weeks, and a council officer will contact the group within 10 working days from this committee in order to arrange a suitable time to discuss your ideas and your proposals. So expect that contact from an officer shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the next question then is from Alex. Is that Alex, you joined us today? Yeah.
Of course. One moment. It's on the button on the right, yes? Thank you. Okay, I prefer to start off reading a question of someone who is absent at the moment, as I think it links in quite well.
Just for clarity, Alex, whose question is that? Just so we know, in case people are following.
One of our members called Lois.
Okay. So we'll do Lois's first and then your question.
Yes.
Okay, yep.
Thank you to the committee for the response, and we look forward to meeting with the council representative. Over the 13-month period covered by our Freedom of Information request, the council's estimated cost in maintaining the Vestry Hall was $118,000 for a building that in this same Freedom of Information request was revealed for its duration to be unbooked 92% of the time. Does arranging a meeting with a council representative mean that the council acknowledges the seriousness of this situation, both to residents in Burngreave and to the taxpayer? And will this representative have any power to deal with the root cause of the issue, the high cost of booking the building?
Thanks very much to Lois for asking the question and for the follow-up. Alex, thanks for reading it on their behalf. Look, arranging a meeting with the council representative reflects our commitment to understand and address the concerns that Lois and you, Acorn Burngreave, clearly have raised today. The meeting is an important step to acknowledge that there are challenges you present and also ensure that your perspectives are heard, allowing us to collectively explore what those options might be in order to allow us to move forward. So, just to recap on that further point I just gave, contact will be made with the group within 10 working days in order to begin arranging that conversation. So, Alex, you've also got a supplementary question. Do you want to ask that, please?
Thank you. This campaign exists because over 60 people in Burngreave sacrificed an evening and talked to one another about what they felt deprived of. A campaign to create a community hub in a spacious community building was voted on, and it's our responsibility to bring you to the table. Since starting this campaign, we've knocked on 1,000 doors and had community meetings attended by 150 different people. The strength of feeling in this area is very strong. The last time we attended this committee, we were promised a drop-in session on the future of the vestry hall. When we attended this drop-in session, it turned out it had nothing to do with the vestry hall, but rather was a general community day for the area. Can the committee confirm any future drop-ins arranged between us will solely be about the future of the vestry hall and not just a general community day for the area?
Thanks very much for your question. I think it's important to be clear what we're talking about here. We're talking about arranging a meeting with Acorn Burngreave, and I've just given an answer about that. That will be about the building and the barriers that you and others have highlighted that you think are there for the building's use. Drop-ins or open days are a different matter, and so I understand from officers that open days will highlight the building, its facilities, what's available, and the booking process in order to encourage greater use from the local community. And further conversation at that meeting with you about the difference between those drop-ins and how you think they would be helpful can, of course, be had. So just to recap, we'll be getting in touch to arrange that follow-up meeting, and I'm really grateful to Mohammed, Justine, Alex and Lois for coming today, and also Ms. Santh for asking one of those questions. So thank you for your questions and for the follow-ups. Thank you very much.
I'd like to take just a moment of your time. I do promise for no more than 2 minutes, if that's okay.
We have actually already given you an opportunity to ask your question today. If you want to ask a follow-up question, then you can, of course, table it at a future meeting. As you're here, I'll give you 30 seconds, if that's all right. We've got a very full public meeting today, lots of business that we need to get through, and in order, you'll appreciate that it's important to be fair in order to give people the right opportunities and if they wanted to also ask their questions. So just 30 seconds, please, Mohammed.
Of course. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is a community centre in Burngreave, one of the most deprived communities in Sheffield. It seems quite insignificant to many, but I myself, as a science teacher, was supported in the community by buildings that were both shopping centres and small little malls, and I became who I became. I'm a first-generation immigrant and came to this country at the age of 8, not speaking much English myself. I required such support and places and these kind of facilities where I could be taught, and this is the future we're hoping for, building Life as Shore, to help and support our local communities. I think with your help and support, we can achieve for the next generation and so have kids that can succeed and not be a burden into the city, and they can make something of themselves. Thank you.
On behalf of all the committee, let me say thank you very much for your service as a teacher, and we want to make sure that when we're able to sit down with you, we can understand how best to move forward. So thank you again for coming today. Thank you. Yes, and there's one further question from Lewis Farrington. Lewis isn't able to join us today, and there was a supplementary question received from Lewis, and I'll ask Craig to just give the answer on that one. Thank you. Craig, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll read the question out on behalf of Louis. Which religion or belief-based campaigns and events is Sheffield City Council able to support in 2025, and is there a process for nominating campaigns?
Great, okay, and the answer to that is being provided to Lewis direct.
That's right, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for everyone joining us today. So that concludes item 5 on the agenda. Item 6 is members' questions from members of this committee. None have been received on this occasion. Item number 7 is the report that is a standard feature of our agendas, which notes the retirement of staff at the City Council, and it's an opportunity for us to thank members of staff for their long-standing service to the City Council and to the city. And I'm sure that members, when they look at the report on page 21, will see names of officers that they have worked with over the years, and it is quite striking, as always, just how many long years people have contributed to this city. So let me just read the recommendations: that we place on record our appreciation of the valuable service to the City Council by the members of staff in the report, and we extend to them our best wishes for the future and a very long and happy retirement. And I'm sure members will join me in agreeing that recommendation. Thank you all very much. Item number 8 today on our agenda is the committee's work programme. This is the last SNR meeting of this municipal year, but we'll be looking ahead to further meetings coming up. And with that, let me hand over to Craig Rogerson from Democratic Services to just run through key points from the work programme. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Members have got the latest version of the work programme in their pack, starting on page 23. There's 3 key areas to highlight to members for this meeting. Section 2, page 25, there's details of a reference from the South LAC on the cost of living support work, and attached at Appendix 4, page 35, is a suggested response from the Director of Customer Experience and Communities. The second key point is in Section 3. That sets out a proposal for Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee to consider the Licensing Authority policy statements under the Licensing Act 2003. And then finally, on page 27, there's details of the new items to be added to the work programme. One of those is on today's agenda, the SIMCA item. One was agreed at the last meeting on burial provision, and then there's one additional item due in June on a major event hosting opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. So an opportunity, if anyone wants to come in to ask any questions, make any comments on that. I see Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Can I make a comment on the South LAC motion, being that I'm a South LAC member and I think I'm the only one here? Is that appropriate? Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to point out the intention of this motion was to draw attention to the fact that our pilot has been proven to be really successful in getting more money in people's pockets. We've had face-to-face advice in community centres, specifically helping people with bills and benefits. That's the financial navigator role, and they're a real asset to the council. And it's great to see these skills sort of in-house as such. So the LAC's funded them through our budget until June, and I think this statement means that they'll be continue to be funded until October, when this committee will consider the report. Is that right? So that's good, welcomed. The point I wanted to make is regarding rollout of the advice work. This was obviously passed at full council, has got cross-party support. So I hope this committee, when you hear more details in October, I'm just taking this opportunity to raise this, that you will push for face-to-face advice, no watering down. It's face-to-face advice that makes the difference. Not everyone has the access to the internet or capacity to make a phone call. So this is a plea really to remember that face-to-face is the key. If people get the good advice early on, it can massively improve their lives. That's good for people, communities, the economy, health and well-being, the list goes on. Basically, it's a really good thing, so don't pass this up, and please insist on face-to-face when it comes to committee. So apologies for my directness. I just thought it was important to show that the intention needs to be followed through on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elliott. I think we'll note those comments and obviously consider them when this comes back to the committee in the autumn. And I'm sure that officers who are working with us to prepare that response in due course will take those comments into account. I don't see anyone else who wants to come in on the work programme item. So can I ask members if they give their approval to the recommendations set out on page 24? Okay, thank you very much indeed. If I could just ask people to switch phones off, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Right, we are now on to item number 9 on our agenda, which is the annual equality report for 2024-25. And here I'm going to be joined by Claire Taylor and Jane English, who will introduce the report, and also Adele Robinson. Thank you all very much. For the benefit of people in the room and also those watching online, I wonder if you could please just briefly introduce yourselves and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. My name's Claire Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. I'll hand over to Jane.
Good afternoon, I'm Jane English. I'm Director of People and Organisational Culture.
Del Robinson, Equalities and Engagement Manager. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's really good to be here today, and I'm conscious that the report before you is fairly lengthy, and that committee members will have had a chance to have a read of it, and you've already had a short briefing about it. So I will try and keep introductory comments concise, and you'll be relieved to know I won't be going through the report line by line. The report is an important look back at our work in relation to equalities, inclusion, diversity and equity, and the work that we've been undertaken over the last year. It's a comprehensive summary of our activity and our citywide achievements, and I really hope it conveys the breadth and depth of the work that we've been undertaking, and also I think the passion and commitment that we have in support of this agenda. I do recognise, however, that it couldn't possibly cover everything the Council does, but I do hope that all of the policy committee chairs around the room can see examples of practice and delivery in their areas. And likewise, colleagues from the strategic leadership team who are here, as it's important to recognise that whilst this is a cross-cutting report, the actual delivery of work happens every day within our directorates. I'd also really like to take this opportunity to reflect the fundamental importance of partnership and collaborative work. So the covering report to the paper sets out, I think it's paragraph 4.2, the key role of community, voluntary, faith and social sectors. It's foundational work in a city where diversity and inclusivity is prioritised and respected, and I think it would be fair and important to recognise that most everything undertaken in this report in relation to inclusion is done so in partnership, and it's important to put on record the Council's respect and recognition and appreciation for this dedicated work that happens across the city. And certainly the aim of this report is to celebrate that work and certainly not take credit for it where others have contributed significantly, and that's certainly the case across the piece. So in 2023, the Council consulted on a new set of equalities objectives, and in 2024, early 2024, this committee adopted them. They're based on 4 key themes which are set out in the report. The reports, I think they start at page 18. They're our commitments around leadership, which is our role as leaders of place, community leaders, our role as partners and organisational leaders. It's around the delivery of service, so that's closely aligned to our transformation work, and you'll have seen me here previously talking about things like customer experience, but that's a real commitment to designing services that are accessible, whether that's digitally, face-to-face, whether it's physical requirements, cultural sensitivity, translation. It has a priority and a set of goals around how we work in partnership with our communities, and that's about promoting inclusion, tackling prejudice and discrimination, and celebrating the city's diversity. And then it has a role particularly associated with our role as an employer, so people and culture. And I'd like to actually take a moment to recognise the really active employee hubs We've got several across the organisation, and they really contribute to this agenda, often in their own time and through their own personal commitments. So, as I said, this report's retrospective. It sets out the work under each of these themes and their underpinning goals. I think looking forward, we have much more work to do, and we certainly don't think this is a job done. So we have a commitment to become an anti-racist city and to be a council that's truly inclusive, a place where everyone feels they can belong, and that's regardless of their race, sex, or any other characteristic. That's felt by passion and commitment by many of us. But I think it would be reasonable and fair for me to say that system change is difficult, and we recognise that we always have to do more. And that includes things that are highlighted in the report, such as always increasing the diversity and representativeness of our workforce and leadership. Some commitments particularly around to improving how we engage with all communities to help shape and design service improvements, and then always thinking about how we can role model inclusive practice as leaders and in partnership. So the recommendations in this report are set out, and I just have a couple of remarks in relation to them before I finish for questions. So particularly recommendation 2 sets out the proposed awareness days. We do aim to move to a longer term plan which we can share with community groups and consult more widely on those going forward. And that's a commitment that we intend to enact this year. So I just wanted to put that context into recommendation 2. Recommendations 3 and 4 directly in response to the work of the Finance and Performance Committee. So we have the opportunity now, with the expanded remit of that committee, to look at performance reporting and scrutiny of performance in more detail, and that relates to both the delivery of the Council's equality plan and objectives, but also in terms of how our Council plan and other priorities are considered through different equalities dimensions. And that's been a specific request of the Finance and Performance Committee. Really keen that our performance is reported in public and that the scrutiny role of that committee is supported and developed during this year. So an annual report's good, it's long, but I think quarterly oversight is even better. And this year we also intend to bring a self-assessment against the local government equality standards to that committee, and then explore an external review of our work and development going forwards. So that's a little bit of context to recommendations 3 and 4. And finally, recommendation 5, again, it's as set out, but I think it's really important to recognise that we publish our gender pay gap report in the necessary format. We do publish ethnicity and disability data. We could do more to align it, so we've taken a commitment to make sure that we publish those all together going forward. So that's a commitment to next year as well, following some feedback from members. So that's all I wanted to say by way of context for the recommendations. The last thing I'd say is I'm very conscious that this year we're expecting to receive new employment legislation, and we'll need to understand the implications of this for our workforce and for our role across all of those dimensions. And there's also the recent judgments of the Supreme Court in relation to sex-based rights that we'll need to take into account. So this report's retrospective, so I haven't included commentary around those within this report, and we haven't got enough clarity yet of the consequences and implications of this legal framework. So I haven't addressed it in here. It's too soon to set those implications out, and I'm probably not particularly helpful to speculate. But what I will say is when the implications for policy and for service delivery are understood, we will make arrangements for appropriate briefings to members, staff groups and our trade union colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Jane, Adele, is there anything further you want to add at this stage?
No, nothing further at this stage, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll then open up to any members who wish to ask any questions or provide any comments on the report or the presentation from Claire. Councillor Smith and then Councillor Elliott, please. Let's go Councillor Elliott first and then come back to Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Claire. Just a quick question for you. Really welcome the work on raising awareness and reducing stigma with regards to menopause. Is this reflected in the Council's policies, the HR policies towards employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Adele's team has done some amazing work to raise this awareness. We had some fantastic events in the city, attended by some of the members here. We do have a menopause policy, and the plan is to actually build on this in the coming year. It's a really important aspect to recognise the impact it has on employees and their ability to come to work and the impact on their everyday. So absolutely, it's something we will just continue to focus on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a very minor point. On page 45, you talk about events. So I'm just wondering, just a housekeeping point of view, does that programme, do you interact with the Communities Committee? Is it EDSC? How's that going to work? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the events, as Claire noted, we're working with, first of all, people across the council in different departments like culture and our city centre events team, and then we intend for this to be part of discussion with communities, what events that people want to see, but it has to be then within the agreed programme. So it will be definitely, the events are always with community groups. We don't put them on separately, we do it with communities, and the events are generally designed by the communities and run by communities, and quite often we just provide the support to the communities in doing that for all the events.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dale and then Councillor Johnson. We'll take those two together, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things from me. I'm really interested to see the breaking down barriers part of this. It's really important when supporting people with hearing impairment are able to actually access services. So the sign-in service, I think that's a really key element that everyone's worked on. So thank you for that. And it would be remiss of me not to mention having care experience as a protected characteristic. We did put that through Council in 2023. So thank you to everyone for all the work that's happening there. And looking forward to looking at the outcomes of the Brighter Futures Fund, just would like to thank Waitrose for offering work experience to our care experience young people, and to Zest for offering swimming lessons for our children in foster care. Just putting it out there again, if anybody's watching, we are always looking for support for our children who are care experienced. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dale. Thank you for your work to champion this agenda within the Council. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thanks. Yes, just a couple of points from me. Echo what Councillor Dale said, and those are really good examples of how large organisations can make a difference to the world around them. So I'm just going to comment on the fact that the report contains quite a long list of good examples of equality work, and that does give examples of the range of things that can be done and we should be done, so they will improve people's lives. My point is that it isn't only enough to have a list of examples, and the really difficult work on equality is the infrastructure and the whole supportive environment that we operate in and should operate in, that is about continually eliminating issues of inequality and disadvantage in everything that the Council does. And of course, there's a lot of those things that are not quite so easy to describe in a long list of examples there. The second point I want to make is simply down to the fact that a lot of equalities issues are not necessarily popular. So whilst we always want to have good consultations with the public and with our staff and so on with voluntary organisations, it can't always go on the head count of the most popular option. And this is an example where inequality is where as a council we're constantly balancing up competing interests against other competing interests. And this is where it's really important that we don't shy away from that in the equality work, because overall you get a better outcome for everyone. So that's the real value of this. Equality work isn't just about benefiting small groups of people here and there. It's about the collective overall benefits that we get by eliminating the problems that we have with those differentials. So thanks for that. I'm very happy with this report.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether, Claire, you want to come back on any of that?
I thank the committee for their comments. I think we're very conscious that the systemic and the causal factors of inequality need to be addressed in that much more fundamental way. So you should see in all of our Tier 1 strategies, taking inspiration from our council plan and city goals, that reflected. And one of the reasons I'm so keen to report quarterly in public going forward and think about the equalities dimensions in the council plan is to start to think much more widely around that. And one of the reasons why I'll be keen to seek that self-assessment moving towards some form of external review is also to continue challenge and start to address some of those really difficult questions to answer, difficult topics to talk about, and also difficult problems to address. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentations today and for the work that's gone in to prepare the report, but fundamentally the work that will now be carried forward as we go into the new year. And as has been highlighted, Finance and Performance Committee will have more of a regular interaction with the performance data in this space. So a number of recommendations which are set out on page 38 for clarity. Let me just recap them. That this committee is recommended to consider and note the annual quality report, that we agree the proposed annual Equality Awareness Days to be marked in the year 2025 through to 26. Request that officers continue to develop the Council's corporate performance framework to include progress against the equalities objectives and greater analysis of performance in relation to the Council plan. Note the role of Finance Performance Committee as the body responsible for oversight and scrutiny of performance, including equalities performance and workforce data. We note the gender pay gap and request that officers include the equivalent data for disability and ethnicity in a comparative format annually as we go forward. Are members happy to support those recommendations? Great, thank you very much. Thank you. So item 10 then, moving swiftly on our agenda, is to be presented by David Hollis. And this is a report about Sheffield City Council's consent for powers to be transferred to the South Yorkshire Mayor from the Department of Education. And I'll just give David a second. So, David, for the benefit of people in the room and those watching online, if you could just briefly introduce yourself again and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. David Hollis, General Counsel. I will do a relatively brief on this. It's a bit of a technical report, and you'll be pleased to hear that you won't have a lawyer just repeating a lot of information and legal information that's in the report. This is the request for consent of the Council as a member of the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority to additional powers being transferred from the Department for Education and the Secretary of State to the Mayoral Combined Authority in relation to adult skills funding. There are already shared powers between the Department for Education and the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority that they exercise concurrently, and that allows the funding in relation to adult skills to be transferred and considered and handed out at a local level rather than by government. The need for this is that the government have introduced new qualifications, technical education qualifications, and that they have been approved now and are coming into force and delivery from the autumn of this year. Without the transfer of this funding power to the SIMCA, then the funding decisions would only be able to be taken at national government level, and therefore the proposal is they can be taken at local level. You will see that the order itself covers all the similar mayoral combined authorities who already have these shared powers, and this is something that is being transferred to all the mayoral combined authorities. This won't have any direct impact on the council. The lifelong and skills team position our provision at those entering education rather than at this level. So that funding, this isn't the type of funding that we would be looking to go for, but what it does do is widen the provision in the South Yorkshire area and therefore the Sheffield area, and this is likely to be a follow-on education opportunity for those that we fund and look to provide further skills to. So I don't know if there's any particular questions.
Thank you very much, David, for setting that out. I've seen Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So as Chair of the committee that covers adult skills, David and I have had the conversation about this, so I support this. However, it would be remiss of me not to point out a particular risk that, as David said, Sheffield has been very, very successful at targeting lifelong learning and skills at a foundational level, reaching out to harder to reach parts of the community, helping people get their first first step onto the employment ladder. With the introduction of T-levels, which are a good idea, there is a risk that funding gets spread more widely, which may hamper us in the future. We have been given an assurance that for the year 25-26 there isn't an implication. But as our representative on the MCA, Tom, if you could keep an eye on that, because these are a good idea, but there is a risk to the other work that we do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Smith. I think we'd all agree that it's better that decisions are taken in regions rather than necessarily in Whitehall. Decisions then can be made and informed and shaped by people who are closest to communities. And of course, as a representative of Sheffield City Council on the MCA board, I'll be making sure that these decisions are made in the best interests of our communities. Councillor Elliott, please.
Thank you. I just wondered, can Sheffield City Council take the opportunity to feed into this? So, looking at technical qualifications that support skill shortages, so deep retrofit work, renewables, shortages, ecologists, things like that. And also, will SIMCA be partnering with Sheffield businesses and education providers to deliver these qualifications?
The answer to the second one is yes. They are a funder, so they are likely to use other organisations within the city to deliver these qualifications. I'm sure that my colleagues in skills section and Councillor Smith as well as the chair, and probably Councillor Hunt as a member of SIMCA, will be involved in the policy development of how SIMCA itself wants to move forward with the funding of these level of qualifications.
Okay. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. I don't see anyone else who wants to come in on this. It is obviously a technical report. So unless anyone really wants to come in, then I'll ask that the committee gives consideration to the recommendation, which is that we give Sheffield City Council's consent to the making of the Combined Authorities Adult Education's Function Amendment Order 2025 in order to transfer powers from the DFE to the South Yorkshire Mayor. And members happy to support that recommendation. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. So, item number 11 on today's agenda is the Sheffield Plan, and particularly the proposed additional site allocations and an update on progress with the plan. Okay, so for colleagues in the gallery, we've been joined by a number of colleagues here today who will present the report and then be able to join us in the conversation if there are any questions or feedback on it. For the benefit of people who are in the room but also watching online, perhaps you can just each introduce yourself briefly and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's Will Stewart. I'm Director of Investment, Climate Change and Planning.
Simon Vincent, Strategic Planning Service Manager. Mike Johnson, Head of Planning at the City Council, and I'll pass back to Simon to do the introduction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to give quite a full introduction, if that's okay, I think, given the interest there's been in this particular report. So the report is about focused changes to the Sheffield Draft Local Plan, what we refer to as the Sheffield Plan. The report proposes some additional site allocations that will be provided by releasing land from the Greenbelt. I think before just talking about the Greenbelt release more specifically, I want to just provide a bit of context in relation to the Sheffield Plan, as well as emphasising the overall importance of the plan to the future of the city. The plan covers the whole of Sheffield, except the area within the Peak District National Park, and sets out the overall requirement for new development over a 17-year period from 2022 to 2039. The plan, once adopted, will set out new standards for development in Sheffield, including, for example, higher environmental standards to reduce carbon emissions and better space standards for new homes. Amongst other things, it will help the city deliver more affordable housing, support regeneration and investment, and enable more coordinated delivery of infrastructure. It's a crucial part of the city's growth plan. In fact, the growth plan cannot be delivered without the local plan. It provides certainty for investors and will help to attract funding for major regeneration projects from government departments and through agencies such as Homes England. As many of you will know, I'm sure, the draft plan was submitted to the government in October 2023 for public examination. 3 inspectors were subsequently appointed by the government to examine the soundness of the plan. And the tests of soundness are set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. I won't go into those now. The submitted plan proposes providing 34,680 additional homes and nearly 218 hectares of land for employment over the period 2022 to 2039. 89% of the new homes and virtually all the employment land is on brownfield sites. Those are really important figures to have in mind when considering the scale of release being proposed in this report. It's important to stress that even with the Greenbelt release proposed here, the strategy remains one of urban regeneration, with a strong focus on higher density development in the central area of Sheffield. And I think it's important not to lose sight of that fact amongst the discussions that are currently going on. As I'm sure you're aware, the plan, as submitted, did not propose any release of greenfield land in the Greenbelt for development. The only proposed release is at the former Norton Aerodrome, a sustainably located brownfield site where we've already proposed an allocation for 270 new homes. The inspectors held a series of public hearings last year into various aspects of the plan, but they paused the examination in November because they said that based on the evidence they'd heard up to that point, they had concerns about the supply of employment and housing land proposed in the plan. The inspectors subsequently wrote to the Council in February to formally set out their preliminary conclusions. Whilst they accepted much of the Council's evidence, they considered that both the housing and employment land requirements should be higher than is proposed in the draft plan. It is, however, important to acknowledge that they have accepted the Council's evidence that the housing need figure that was calculated using the previous government standard methodology is not justified. Some of you, I'm sure, will recall that that included a 35% uplift for the 20 largest urban centres in England, including Sheffield, and that pushed Sheffield's housing need figure to over 3,000 homes a year. So the inspectors have rejected that methodology. However, the inspectors do think that the housing requirement should be increased from 34,680 additional homes to 38,012. That equates to 2,236 homes a year. They also consider that the total employment land requirement should be increased from 217.6 hectares to 237.2 hectares. It's perhaps worth noting here that had the previous government's housing need figure been accepted by the inspectors, we would be looking at a housing requirement figure of over 51,000 homes. That's over 13,000 homes more than is now being proposed in this strategy. It's also worth mentioning here that the latest revisions to the standard methodology published by the government in December last year would increase Sheffield's housing requirement to 2,390 homes per year, and that would equate to over 40,600 homes over a 17-year period. However, because the Sheffield plan was submitted in October 2023, it's being examined under the previous National Planning Policy Framework, and that means that new figure doesn't apply. I'm mentioning that now because I will briefly return to the implications of that towards the end of this introduction when I talk about the implications of rejecting the recommendations in the report. That revised housing need figure would become relevant in the context of producing a whole new local plan. So I think it's important to bear that in mind, and I'll come back to that in a minute. As I said, the inspectors have accepted a lot of what we said about the need to regenerate the urban areas and focus growth in the central area. But they also think that releasing some land on the edge of the city would, for example, help to provide a better choice of house types and meet a wider range of housing needs, including the need for affordable housing. They also suggest providing more employment land would aid market choice and flexibility and provide a positively prepared strategy. We as officers agree with those views. Taking into account the evidence on land supply, the inspectors have concluded there's a shortfall of 3,539 homes and a shortfall of 52.8 hectares of employment land. The inspectors consider that exceptional circumstances could exist to justify the release of greenbelt land for development, but we are required under national policy to explore all other reasonable alternatives first. And in their letter, the inspectors asked us to review the capacity of the urban areas again to see if there's scope to accommodate any more development. And they also asked us to check again with neighbouring authorities to see if they could meet any of Sheffield's needs. We've done both those things. The details are set out in sections 3.3 and 3.4 of the report. So have we done all we can to avoid the need for greenbelt release? Well, we think we have. We've reviewed urban capacity. We have allocated all the brownfield sites in the urban area that have been promoted to us, as well as sites identified through our own surveys. The inspectors have ruled out some sites as allocations, but have accepted that there is a supply of unallocated land that will deliver the generous level of windfall development that we'd assumed in our assessment of supply. So they've accepted our evidence on windfalls, and I think that's an important point to make. We've already upped the capacity of the central area in the submitted plan, from where we were in perhaps 2018. We commissioned work to look at how we could redevelop parts of the city centre, building taller where it's appropriate to do so, but not at the expense of the character of the historic parts of the city centre. That has led to the city centre vision and the production of master plans for key priority neighbourhoods. And that work has led us to increase the supply of the central area from 10,000 homes to over 18,000 homes in the draft plan. We don't think, therefore, that there is any additional capacity for housing within the urban areas, given the already generous allowance for windfall development that has been agreed by the inspectors. We have identified some additional capacity in the urban areas for employment development, but not enough to meet the shortfall identified by the inspectors, and there's detail about that in paragraphs 3.3.3, 3.4.3 in the report. We've written again to all the local authorities in the former Sheffield City region to ask again if they could meet some of Sheffield's needs. They all indicated previously they were unable to do so. 6 of the 9 local authorities have so far reconfirmed their position in writing, but that still remains their position. In fact, their ability to meet overspill from Sheffield has been made more difficult due to increases in the housing need figure following changes to the standard methodology. So they all have higher housing targets to meet themselves. We are aware that there have been questions about whether we could raise densities further on brownfield sites or increase densities on the proposed allocations in the greenbelt to reduce the amount of land that is needed. We think the density assumptions we've applied to both the urban sites and greenbelt sites are realistic and balance the need to deliver more homes with the need to protect the character of the city. The inspectors have, in fact, already considered the densities of the urban sites, and their conclusions on land supply take account of their conclusions on density. Furthermore, building more smaller homes in the city centre or on sites in other areas will not address the inspectors' concerns about the type of housing being provided, in particular the supply of family-sized homes. Even with the proposed allocated sites in this report, the strategy in the Sheffield plan would continue to be one focused on urban regeneration. The city has been very successful in developing brownfield sites, meaning Sheffield's greenbelt has remained virtually unaltered for over 40 years. But it has reached the point where some limited greenbelt release is needed to provide land for more homes and jobs. The proposed sites that will help deliver a better mix of housing, meeting a wider range of housing needs, including a better supply of affordable homes. They will also help attract businesses to the city, providing more jobs. In our view, the sites proposed for greenbelt release represent a sustainable strategy for dealing with the concerns raised by the inspectors. The sites have been subject to sustainability appraisal, and we've considered the impact on the purposes of the greenbelt. We've set out in the report the rigorous process we've been through in selecting the sites, and there's also considerably more detail in the topic paper on site selection, which is Appendix 6 of the report. In accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework, the sites are generally concentrated in areas that have the best accessibility to public transport. Particularly, there are sites close to tram routes, but also locations that are relatively close to existing rail stations or potential new stations on the Barrow Hill railway line in the east of the city or in the Upper Don Valley. We've highlighted in section 3.8 of the report that any sites released from the Greenbelt will be subject to the government's new golden rules. The golden rules have introduced specific enhanced requirements in relation to the provision of affordable housing, infrastructure and open space. So these are stronger requirements that would not apply to other non-Greenbelt sites. The sites put forward in the Greenbelt release, in the report before you today, provide capacity for just under 4,000 homes and 67.35 hectares of employment land. If accepted, they would comprise just over 10% of the total housing supply and 25% of the total employment land supply. The development proposed on Greenbelt sites would not all be built out at once. It's unlikely that the largest housing sites would deliver any completions before about 2030 or 2031. They would be built out over a number of years, allowing time to bring forward the necessary associated infrastructure. We recognise that the proposed housing and employment allocations provide slightly more land than is needed to meet the shortfalls identified by the inspectors, but we think this is necessary to provide flexibility and reduce risk. It also diversifies the type of site that is available, helping to support the growth plan. Finally, in the last minute or two, I would just like to urge you to think very carefully about the consequences of not supporting the recommendations in this report. We recognise that development on greenfield sites is never popular with the communities that are affected. But if more land is not provided, it is almost certain that the Sheffield plan will be found unsound. The Council will be asked to withdraw the plan and start work on an entirely new local plan. This would need to be submitted to the government by December 2026 at the latest. I mentioned earlier that the government has introduced the new methodology for calculating housing need, and that the annual housing need figure generated by that methodology is higher than that now proposed by the inspectors. Any new plan would need to use that higher figure and would need to look further ahead, probably to 2042 or 2043. By the time a new plan could be produced, around 18 months, more of the brownfield sites would have been used up. This would potentially mean far more Greenbelt land having to be released than is proposed in this report. In the absence of an adopted plan, the city would be vulnerable to speculative applications on Greenbelt and greenfield sites, and this is particularly the case given the government's new focus on enabling development on land falling within the new classification of grey belt. I was going to say a little bit about public consultation, but the Chair has already covered that at the beginning. I would just add that the inspectors would use the responses to the consultation to set agendas for public hearings in the autumn. Anyone seeking a change to the proposed allocations will be entitled to present further written evidence and or appear at the hearings. Once the public hearings have ended, the inspectors will issue their preliminary report, which will recommend main modifications where they are necessary to make the plan sound. This may or may not include some of the sites currently being considered in the report before you today. Finally, the amendments that the inspector considers are required to make the plan sound will be subject to a further period of public consultation that would take place early in 2026. That would be on the main modifications. The Council must then make the recommended main modifications if they wish to adopt the plan. Following receipt of the inspector's final report, the plan, including any main modifications, if applicable, will then come back to full Council to be considered for adoption, and we would expect that to be around July 2026. Sorry, that was quite a long introduction, but I hope it's helpful to members of the public and for members to hear that.
Thank you, Simon. Enormously helpful for members, but also members of the public to have that detail, because on an issue that is of such significance to the city, both in our ability to be able to provide new homes for our children and grandchildren, but also to grow the city's economy and to support the growth plan, our plan to grow the city's economy over the next 10 years, it's right that we take the time to set out in detail the significance of the local plan, and also to take time to just be clear about the process that will now take effect were the committee to support the recommendations today. And thank you also for setting out the consequences of not doing so. So, there are a number of members who have already indicated. I've got Councillor Miskell, Councillor Hurst, Councillor Smith. I'll take those three first, take them in rounds, because I'm sure there'll be more rounds rounds to follow, and already I've seen Councillor Otton. So in that order, then please, Councillor Miskell, Hurst and Smith. Thank you.
And thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Simon and the team really for bringing this report to us today and really helping to shepherd the local plan through the process over the years. And it has been somewhat of a journey, hasn't it? I think it's probably important to say to colleagues on the committee that when we consider reports like this, it's important also that we do read the text, but we don't lose sight of the simple truth that housing, of course, is a human right. And we all know, don't we, that that's not just a slogan. It's something that's recognised by the United Nations, and rightly so. And we all agree that everyone in Sheffield deserves a safe, a secure and affordable home, and that gives people the sort of dignity and stability and the chance to build the sort of life that they should expect here in Sheffield. But we also know that without that decent home, everything else becomes much harder, you know, from holding down a job to staying healthy to planning for the future. But unfortunately, of course, we know, don't we, that the reality here in Sheffield from the work that we do in our committee is that unfortunately, over the years, that we haven't built enough homes. And we need to be honest about what that really means for our city. It's held people back, and that's had really profound implications, particularly for the next generation, because young people growing up here in Sheffield should have a chance to stay, and I know that's something that Councillor Dale and members of her committee feel really, really strongly about. Young people should have the ability to be able to build a life, to afford a home in the city that they love, but too many people don't have that opportunity, and the evidence that's been presented to us today shows that it holds people back. And it's also held our economy back, hasn't it, as well, because when people can't find a home that's near work, or they're stuck in temporary accommodation or unsuitable accommodation, it impacts productivity, it places pressure and strain on public services, and it slows down our growth in our city. And I know that's something that Councillor Smith's Committee in Economic Development and Skills is very, very mindful of. It collectively makes us poorer as a city. And that's why, I guess, on this side of the chamber, we really do support housing being a right for everyone. And it's important for all of us to reflect on that and the action that goes with it. And I'd certainly encourage all members to support this report, both here today in SNR, but also when it comes before full council. As we've heard from the officers today, the local plan is just an important step to help us to future-proof Sheffield, but it also helps us to make those important decisions that will be important for the next generation, for our grandchildren to come. But it's also about creating the sort of neighbourhoods that we want to build. And I think it's also important to say, and crucially, that it follows that brownfield first approach that has long been articulated throughout the development of the local plan, with most of the new homes to be built in and around the city centre. And that means 96.4% of all development will take place on brownfield land. Now, I'd be really interested to hear from officers whether they've seen any other recently approved local plans deliver such a high proportion on brownfield sites, because it seems to be quite an extraordinary achievement for Sheffield to do that, and is the right decision to make. In my mind, the plan also sets out a real plan, an ambitious plan for new schools and burial sites. It includes major upgrades to key junctions and roads to ensure that the infrastructure keeps pace with what we need as a city, and that's articulated in the infrastructure development plan that sits alongside it. I'd like to hear more from officers about how that infrastructure development plan will help to support a growing population right across our city. And of course, all of that, apologies, Chair, all of that's supported by the golden rule, isn't it, that the government has articulated when it comes to development on Greenbelt. And I'd be really keen, and Simon's talked about it already, to hear the reflections on what that means in terms of the infrastructure and how that will be delivered alongside new homes and jobs that's articulated in this plan. So
thank you very much, Councillor Miskell. Councillor Smith, Councillor Hurst, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and get directly to the question. Through the briefings that we've had before this meeting, I understand that the sites currently proposed were those that had been offered up during the immediate call for sites a number of years ago, but had been rejected for reasons various and listed on the appendices. But it was always known, going back when I was involved as a cabinet assistant and in the early days of the committees, that we were risking it, that in proposing the number of houses and the industrial development that we could safely support, there was always a risk that the inspectors would come back and say, no, that's not enough. And they have done that. You've minimised that, but they have done that. So what I'd like to know is, what work has been taking place behind the scenes in the meantime to look at master planning to not just build houses and shoehorn them in onto green sites, but to build communities, sustainable communities with transport and doctors and schools and access to dentists, and not overloading the current roads that we have. And I'm thinking about one of the locations at Handsworth Hall Farm, which will impact on double the whammy of the Waverley development, and the sites bounded by Bramley, but which are in the Woodhouse ward, that are sitting right next to Handsworth Road, that we had issues with air quality. And I'm wondering why those have come forwards above other sites. And I also have questions about some sites in the north of the city. Hang on just a second, I will come back to give you those. Oh, right. Northwest S630 and Northwest S31 in Stocksbridge and Upper Don. Who put those forwards, and has any master planning about the support needed to be able to develop them being done behind the scenes? So that's that. I also have a question that I've been asked to ask by a resident. 1,740 of the properties being built, the additional properties being built of the 3,500, are going to be built in the S13 area. That will put great pressure on the already existing infrastructure, and the areas that it's being built on will have an impact on the environment. Isn't this disappointing when we've got a whole city to cope with? Why have we put so many houses there and in the north? That's a specific question I've been asked to ask. And one's a bit more removed. Aren't all the sites, whether they go through and whether they're bolted out and others are put in instead, now fair game for developers, because as the plan progresses towards acceptance, more weight is given to the sites mentioned in it. So couldn't developers come forwards and put applications in now when we don't have adequate land supplies? I also have a number of questions about who proposed those sites that I've just mentioned, who will be leading on those development, and why they were originally ruled out of the original plan. I can give you the numbers again, and I will take answers in writing on those particular issues if you don't have the detail to hand now. So that's sites SO3020, SO2502, SO3061, NW, sorry, this writing's a bit small at this time of day, 530 and NW531. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hurst. So some detailed questions there, which, as you say, may well require further information to be provided. I've got Councillor Smith and then Councillor Otton. Can I just see if other members want to come in so I can indicate? Right, so we'll take a second round. So Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions. I'm just mindful and completely accept this is an incredibly important thing for the city. And as a result of that, we've got people in the public gallery. I'm also aware there, and it doesn't happen very often, we've got a very large number of people watching this meeting online. So I'm just asking, please, councillors on the committee received a very long and detailed set of legal advice as to what we can and can't say in this meeting, which is, let's be honest, going to influence our behaviours and what people see. So I'm wondering, is it possible for legal counsel to take us through that in a spirit of openness so members of the public know the restrictions that are being placed on us, maybe valid reasons, but I think we really need to have that out in the open. Thank you.
To be clear, you're talking about restrictions that require two amendments. I'm restricting. In 12 years of being a councillor, but things come up like this all the time, but in 12 years of being a councillor, I have never seen such a long and detailed list of things that councillors can't do in a meeting. And I think for a spirit of openness, we need to have that out in public. Thank you. Okay, fine. Councillor, I've got councillors Otten, Elliott, Belbin and Crossland who all want to come in. Is there anyone else who wants to come in? Just so I can, sorry, just hang on a second. Is there anyone else who wants to come in to make a point before I follow up with on those initial points? Councillor Johnson, are you asking a follow-up question?
Just to be clear, are we talking about restrictions on what we can say in this meeting?
Thank you. I'm going to address that point because I think it's important to be really clear about any guidance that's been provided with regards to this meeting and also for council, which, as I've already mentioned, will take place on the 14th of May. Let's just address this head on, and I'll ask David Hollis, General Counsel, to just be really, really clear about the guidance that's been provided about this meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's been no guidance issued about what people can say or what can be discussed, although, Chair, that's a matter for you as the Chair in relation to relevance to the report. What we have said is that the recommendations today, they are recommendations that stand as a whole, and there can be no voting in parts to them and no amendments to them today before this committee. When the matter goes to full council, there is then the ability to submit amendments to the motion, but that's not a restriction on today.
Great. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question on
Chair,
that? So my understanding is then that we can't change the numbers and we can't change the words. Is that correct?
Councillor Smith, today you've heard the guidance that's been provided. Okay. Let us come back to the team on that point because I think that point has been made. You can ask the question, but the answer was already given. So, Will, Simon, Michael, do you want to pick up points from earlier comments from particularly Councillor Hurst and any reflections on Councillor Miskell's comments before I then go to Councillor Otten, Elliott, Belbin and Crossland, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Councillor Miskell's comments. We can't tell you where we are in the rankings of sort of brownfield first through local plan. And what we can say is that a very significant portion of the sites that we're proposing are on brownfield land. I think part of that is a reflection of the broader strategy that we set out on probably 4 years ago now, which was to look at the city centre and challenge assumptions on the city centre in terms of what capacities you could reasonably deliver there in a manner that delivered sustainable neighbourhoods and also respected the character of the areas, and that has essentially seen us double the capacity of homes that we have planned for in the city centre. I think there's a question from Councillor Miskell and Councillor Hurst around infrastructure. I'll pass to Simon after I've just finished sort of wrapping up some of the other points. In terms of who's promoted the particular sites, we can provide that information in writing, so that's not a problem. I think the broader question of why they were originally ruled out was simply because they didn't comply with the spatial strategy that the council had chosen to move forward with, which wasn't to build on greenfield, greenbelt sites. Obviously, Simon, through his introduction, has explained why that situation has changed and why we sit in front of you today with the report we do. The broader point on distribution, it's just worth making the point that there are sites proposed across the city, but we do recognise there's a concentration of sites in the southeast and the north. It reflects, again, matters that were picked up in the introduction, but it's a combination of various things which include the sites that were promoted through the local plan process, where existing and planned transport infrastructure is, including new railways and existing railways and trams, access to local facilities and areas of employment to make sure we've got sustainable travel patterns. For the employment sites, a key consideration was access to the M1. And other factors, and there are many, include sort of landscape impacts, and obviously the Peak Park and the impact on that landscape is something that's a consideration. I think overall, the basket of sustainability considerations that we have to put forward means that we feel that we've put in front of you through our recommendations a list of the most sustainable sites. In terms of master planning, it comes at different levels. So the considerations I've just talked to you about in terms of sustainability at strategic level are the matters that we've considered through our sustainability appraisal, through greenbelt scores and through a broader planning appraisal as to why we feel we've presented you with the most sustainable sites. For sites of a particular scale, there will be master planning that will be brought forward as those sites start to come forward through the process, but as we've touched on, delivery of those sites isn't something that's imminent. It takes quite a lot of time. But I'll pass over to Simon now, and Simon can just do a more broad sort of summary of where we are from an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we recognise very much that it is important to bring forward infrastructure alongside the new homes, and that's one of the reasons why we have a policy in the draft local plan which requires on strategic sites, which is anything over 200 homes, to produce a master plan which shows how those sites will be developed. And that includes considering things like whether there's a need for schools, whether there's a need for health facilities, open space on the site. So that would be designed in through the master planning process, and very likely there would be consultation on those master plans further down the line. We've done a lot of work already towards updating our infrastructure delivery plan. We produced an infrastructure delivery plan alongside the submitted local plan, and that was updated during the examination as well. And that looks at particularly the results of the outputs from the transport modelling that has been undertaken to look at the cumulative impact of the proposals and the level of development right across the city on the city's highway network. And there are a number of junction improvements on the M1, on the local road network that are proposed in that infrastructure delivery plan. We've set out some additional improvements in the report that will be necessary as a result of that analysis. And that analysis is ongoing, and we're continuing to have discussions with National Highways, in particular about the implications for the M1. And on discussions with the Education Service, we've identified potential need for 2 secondary schools, and we can also deal with the need to provide a SEND school as well. And those are on 2 of the biggest sites, which are in council ownership, provides us with an opportunity to set aside land to meet education needs on those sites. We've had discussions with the Integrated Care Commission, and they have confirmed to us that they anticipate being able to accommodate the additional growth in population in these areas through extensions to existing facilities. We'll set out more detail on that in the infrastructure delivery plan. Just to mention as well on infrastructure, we've mentioned the golden rules, and that does require that on greenbelt sites, that infrastructure and open space issues are specifically addressed as part of the development.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've now got 5 members who want to come in, so I will ask members to be as brief as they possibly can, starting with Councillor Otten, followed by Councillor Elliott, please.
Thank you, Chair, very much. I wasn't planning to be particularly brief. I must say, thank you for bringing this report to us and for all the work that's gone into it. I do endorse Councillor Miskell's comments about the importance of housing, and I would pay tribute to the efforts that officers have made in the previous round of meeting our housing supply on brownfield sites. That was, I think, that's something the Council agreed. And, you know, I was very glad that we were able to propose that. Obviously, I understand that the Planning Inspectorate, I guess on behalf of the government, have come back to us and said, oh, no, 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 we want more, and you're going to have to take some green belts, and that's what brings us to where we are today. Now, in order for me to understand this process, to have some confidence in it, I'm going to rely on the example of the Parker's Lane site in my ward. Obviously, I understand there are other sites that are also sensitive and controversial, but by way of example and because I'm more familiar with it. Now, I understand that the green belt is not really an environmental policy. And it arose from obviously the campaign, if you don't all know, of Ethel Haythorne-Thwaite to save a particular piece of land in Dawntotley Ward, on Baslow Road, many years ago, and you know that's the primary motivation I would say for the establishment of the green belt. But it is a town planning policy. It deals with town planning concepts like urban sprawl far more than environmental sensitivity or natural beauty. And oh boy, does it show today, because what we have suddenly is a proposal that includes sites like the Parker's Lane site in Dore, which, well, it was previously on the amber list because officers weren't recommending it, and I'm not clear how it's come to be on the green list of recommended sites, given that, on top of all the town planning considerations which didn't qualify it as a green list site, it is now, on top of that, it's environmentally far more sensitive. Building there is encroaching on one of the landscapes, the most outstanding natural beauty in the country. And it's encroaching actually also on the Haythorne-Thwaite Wood as well, and it's cutting down an ecological corridor between the countryside and Ecclesall Woods. It's having, and you know, I'm not going to go into any more than that. There's obviously a whole list of things I could say about it. Do read the report by the Dore Neighbourhood Forum if you want to know more. But given the nature of that site, I mean, can I ask just what possessed you to move it from the amber list and not recommended into the green list and recommended? How on earth did that happen? And if that happened, how can we have confidence in this process? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elliott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few quick questions for officers, thank you. I just want to say, initially, you know, as a Green, I'm very uncomfortable with any building on the green belt, but I'm also very concerned about the consequences of not having a local plan. So thank you, Simon, for going over that. And I'm really pleased we've got the chance to ask questions publicly today before we have the debate and voting at full council. So, the Campaign for Protection of Rural England published an article on Sheffield's local plan a couple of days ago, and it says that 3.6% of Sheffield's green belt would be released under the proposed plan. Does that sound about right? Yeah. So in practice that means it will be available for development by private developers. So adopting the local plan means that 3.6% or thereabouts is potentially available for development. So does that mean the rest of the green belt isn't available for development under the proposal?
Thank you. Councillor Belbin, please.
Thank you, and I want to thank officers again for what I know has been a piece of work that you've had to perform it into very tight deadlines and with an awful lot of complications behind it. And I think you managed to arrive at a position where not only have you kind of put before us some options that meet the criteria we have to meet, but that we do have some options. We have had some options that we've been able to work through, and I think that's been incredibly helpful when we've been coming to take decisions around this. I did just want to comment perhaps on the point that Councillor Elliott just raised. I think I've seen even over the last week how a proposal to build on some land that obviously isn't within the local plan because we don't have one yet, that we will really struggle to turn down planning permission. I think that was on Green Belt, because we do not have a local plan, and we cannot emphasise strongly enough how important it is that we have this plan in place to protect our green belt in the future, and by allocating certain parcels of the green belt, we're actually protecting the majority of it. I did want to ask a question about, I think people have raised questions about the distribution of some of the land. And again, it's really important to remember the vast majority of what's in our local plan we have already agreed. And the vast majority of that is on brownfield and an awful lot of it is in the city centre. So I think, you know, we shouldn't imagine that all the development of our local plan is in the southeast and in the north. But I think quite a lot of it around the infrastructure question is based around the extension of the tram and the fact that the extending the tram will give sustainable transport solutions in particular around those areas. And I've just got a question really about, as we're thinking, I understand there will be review points as we go through the plan as well, that we'll be reviewing every 5 years and looking for possibilities of other housing development. What possibilities there are so that we're developing the infrastructure alongside our housing, that how can we potentially develop infrastructure that might look towards a more even distribution across the city as we develop, as we review the plan as it goes forward, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I've got Councillor Crossland and then Councillor Dale, and then Councillor Hurst wanted to just ask a further point, I think, clarifying on an earlier answer. Councillor Crossland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check with, just nodding's fine, that the original light industrial site at Eckington Way is still within the local plan going forward? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Well, the government's own guidance says that a local authority, such as us, can suggest a main modification to the plan, which is what we're doing, and it also says that a main modification can replace part or all of the site allocation. So we've got a site that we know thousands of people objected to. Full council even passed a motion saying that the site isn't suitable, and yet this report makes no mention of changing the use of that site. Now, this is despite the leader previously saying in this very meeting that decisions are best taken by those closest to them. Well, the people closest to this decision don't want it, and yet we're ignoring those people, and it just feels wrong to me. So that's my first point. My second point is, what is the best thing for economic growth? It's trust. And so, as a local authority, if we're riding roughshod over what people want, then why should they ever trust us as a local authority? Our brand got dragged through the mud with the tree fiasco, which will have had a massive economic impact on Sheffield. Yet we risk breaking that trust with people. So why should businesses and local people trust a thing that we say if we cannot listen to them on the local plan?
Thank you. Councillor Dale, please.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my comments and questions have been asked. I just do have a comment in the fact that looking at what we're doing in children's services and how we're looking at how we ensure that our children belong in their communities and that their families have got access to early years provision, schools, dentists, and, you know, Councillor Hurst alluded to the fact that we need that infrastructure in place. It is right that this plan, alongside the infrastructure delivery plan, will prevent things from happening like have currently happened in other areas of the city, where 2,000 houses have just been built in one ward with no forethought because developers have been able to just build on any piece of land, and now there are issues around school places, access to dentists and doctors' surgeries. I just feel that if without this plan, we are at risk of that happening across the city, which is something that I think that when we just start looking at the health and well-being and inequalities, this is something that we've got to get through alongside the delivery plan for the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Councillor Hurst, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up, something that I'd like you to develop more. In your answer on master planning, you just referred to planning around existing sites and existing developments. Was there any master planning that took place to develop new communities, such as, you know, when we had Westfield and Waterthorpe and Halfway developed, we had master plans there, and they allowed for facilities and structures and green open space. But there are quite a lot of sites mentioned in this list that are not allowable because they're said to be too small, particularly to the west of the city. So is it not profitable going forward to start to look at those so that they can be introduced as additional sites and opportunities, particularly where Greenbelt sites are going to be used for affordable housing, and start to work through some of the issues so that small sites can be clustered together and form reasonable communities.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hurst. So, a range of comments there. Is that a question? Do you want to make it a very brief comment then, and then I'll come back to the team, because that's the last hand I've seen, and then I'll give the chance for colleagues to respond.
Okay, I'll come in now. I just wanted to say something. I'll try and make it fairly brief. Just be clear about where we stand as Greens on this, because it's, as rightly been said, it's a very difficult issue. So, I mean, starting point is that naturally as Greens we oppose building in the green belt. We also oppose building on greenfield sites and indeed some brownfield sites in the urban area, any of which have got, can have really important ecological value and really important amenity value for the people who live there. And of course I speak as a councillor for City Ward, which whatever version of the local plan you might look at is going to have the vast majority of the development affecting a lot of residents very densely packed in together. So when it comes to the people who are most affected, yeah, they're actually the ones in my ward in some ways. But also want to say that, yeah, we're in this very difficult position, and I'm going to say that it's absolutely essential that we get a local plan, just because otherwise we end up with a complete free-for-all for developers. It's something that, as Greens, we've criticised this council for many, many years about the lack of local plan. And it's just essential that we get this through there. So the advice we have is that, as has been set out by the office today, is that to get the local plan approved, we realise we have to have enough housing and enough workplaces identified that will be delivered in the next 15 years, and that's essential to get that in there. So without the up-to-date local plan, we can't stop the poor quality developments, and again, speaking as a council seat ward, we've seen enough of those alongside the very good ones. So it's really important we set those new standards. If we don't have that, we advise that ultimately the government can step in, and occasionally that happens in other places. That'd be far worse. The city would lead to far more building in the green belt. And I think the thing that actually flagged up from the officer report today, which we perhaps didn't give enough weight to, is that the work done by the officers making very extensive representations to the planning inspector have been successful in challenging the government's target figures. And the difference there is about 10,000 homes that we're now not being required to build that otherwise would have been had we been required to stick to the original government figures. Those 10,000 homes would necessarily have been in the green belt. So already the officers have saved us from £10,000 of, £10,000, 10,000 homes being built in the green belt. And that seems to me to be really significant. So I just want to say thanks, guys, for doing that. The other thing which we haven't talked about so much, the officers have mentioned it, is about the importance of the public consultation. So there's going to be a lot of comments going in there. If this goes ahead, then there'll be public consultation. We can encourage everyone to put their comments in. The importance of the consultation is the comments go to the planning inspector who makes the decision. Ultimately, they don't come out of this council because this council doesn't make the decision. And that my final point is, it's just a reflection of the fact that planning policy in the UK is very centralised. It has been for many years. There are many other things that could be done in the country, such as the concerns about requiring developers to actually build something on all those sites they've already got planning permission for, to go back on the narrative that it's planning officers who are blocking the system, to deal with the number of empty homes we've got in the country, and to invest significantly in council housing. But my point is that these are all, I think, good political arguments, but they're completely outside the powers of the council today, and that's why we are where we are. So I'm going to leave it there, actually.
Thank you
So
so much.
thanks again to the officers.
Great, thank you, Councillor Johnson. So, a really helpful set of contributions there and helpful set of questions, and thanks everybody for making those comments, asking those questions. There are clearly further opportunities to discuss this at full council, and as Councillor Johnson has rightly pointed out, there is a public consultation where people in this council and members of the public will be able to have their say about the proposals, those proposals and or rather the submissions to the public consultation will then go straight through to the inspector to be able to consider and to shape the agenda for the examination hearings that will take place later in the year. So I think it's really important that we just understand the process and that we relay that information to any residents who may want to know what happens as a result of a decision taken today and also in a couple of weeks' time at full council. So,
Any master planning question, follow up before we move on, Tom?
we're not moving on. I'm giving the officers a chance to come back. Hold. No. There's plenty. This committee's not going to let me get away with that just yet. There's a few more answers that people rightly want to have for their questions. So with that, let me hand back to Will, Simon and Michael to consider the range of comments that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I will finish by passing to Will to talk about infrastructure on the west side of the city and tram train, and then Simon to just pick up the remainder of the Greenbelt beyond the percentage that we're talking about today. I'll just wrap up a few of the other questions first. In terms of Councillor Otten's point in relation to a particular site, there was a short list of sites that were produced, all of which were considered to be sustainable and appropriate to potentially be allocated. Through conversations and discussions, including officers' consideration of sustainability, a recommended list of sites has been put forward to this committee today. As we've talked about, there'll be the opportunity through public consultation to make representations around any concerns in respect to that site, any sites, including the site Councillor Otten's mentioned today, and that will be considered further through the examination. In terms of Eckington Way, that has been considered and debated extensively at examination, and we wait to hear the inspector's views on that site. At this point in time, that is not something the inspector has put into the scope of things that we need to consider in this committee and through our recommendations. Councillor Dale's view on sort of unplanned growth, and we've heard a lot about infrastructure today, and that's absolutely a key consideration in terms of why we need a local plan and why it's so important for a city to make sure that the infrastructure is in the right place to support growth. And in terms of master planning for Councillor Hurst, what we see is a combination of large sites and small sites put forward. Now, with a larger site, you have got the ability and a scale to deliver infrastructure on site. So one of the benefits of smaller sites to sit alongside that as a broader strategy means that you are not putting too much strain on different parts of the city in terms of infrastructure, so you can spread your development sites more broadly. I will pass to Will initially just to touch on the infrastructure question that Councillor Belvin picked up.
Yeah, happy to do that. And I think, you know, infrastructure is a really key theme of the discussion today. I think it's worth noting at the outset that obviously officers, Simon and Mike as the principal officers, but a whole broad cohort of officers have been working very closely with our transport colleagues during the development of the infrastructure delivery plan, taking advice and making sure that we are understanding as best we can the impact of these site proposals on the local plan. It's clear that that's a continuing piece of work. We need to take into account potential investment around tram extensions. You've mentioned that, and actually one of the things that we've considered in terms of site allocations in the Greenbelt is to try to get as much of this proposed development in the Greenbelt around existing or proposed routes. Of course, some of these sites are quite large in scale, and actually what we hope is that as they come forward, there's a kind of parallel development of transport infrastructure. But as officers have noted today, there will be specific restrictions around how quickly sites can come forward, particularly where transport infrastructure is needed, particularly around junction improvements. I think the other thing I just want to flag is that you know, members in this committee may be aware that we seem to be heading back towards some kind of regional planning policy position. That's what the government's outlined is its direction. So a South Yorkshire spatial development strategy, which we anticipate to be delivered around the time of the next plan review in probably about 5 years' time, or 5 years after the proposed adoption, will allow us to think more strategically about a regional perspective. So actually, where we've talked about approaching other local authorities about their need and about whether we can distribute allocations more equitably across the region, that will be the opportunity through the regional spatial strategy to have those conversations. So yes, just to clarify, there will be a plan review. We have to do a plan review every 5 years should this plan be adopted. And at that point, you know, it's likely that further sites will be proposed as part of that process. That's what the inspectorate will ask us to do. But of course, they will be done in the context of probably a further developed plan around tram expansion. Will probably be in the realms of bus franchising by that point as well. So opportunities to be able to influence the network. And of course, as I've mentioned, that South Yorkshire spatial development strategy as well, looking at a broader distribution across the region. So our hope is that when we get to a plan review 5 years after this proposed adoption, that there will be those additional considerations.
Sorry, just in response to Councillor Elliott's question about the 3.6% and does that give us protection for the rest of the Greenbelt? Yeah, the 3.6% figure is correct. It's in the report. Not all of that 3.6% would be developable. There would be a significant proportion of that would be open space and undeveloped land. So in assessing the capacities of the sites, we've made assumptions about protecting land for open space within those allocations. And other land would remain undeveloped in the immediate vicinity of those sites as well. I mean, some of them are local wildlife sites that would remain undeveloped, as they sit sort of outside the allocated site, but would potentially be land that would need to come out of the greenbelt to create a sensible greenbelt boundary. Adopting the plan will put us in a much stronger position to resist applications on the remainder of the greenbelt. We will obviously need to maintain a 5-year supply of deliverable sites, and there are still discussions to be had with the inspectors about whether Sheffield has a stepped trajectory in its housing requirement, which would mean setting a slightly lower housing requirement for the first 5 years that then steps up later on when more of the regeneration sites are forecast to deliver completions. So there are some big sites within the city centre that would deliver perhaps from 2030 onwards, and that would enable us to further boost delivery and increase our 5-year supply over that period. So we'd set a lower requirement for the first 5 years. So as long as we've got that 5-year supply, we're quite safe in terms of resisting development on other greenbelt sites.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Elliott, just a very, very quick follow-up, please.
Thank you. Just a very, very quick question. Will, you mentioned the South Yorkshire Spatial Plan. Will the LNRS fit into that local nature recovery strategy to protect our wildlife corridors?
Yeah, it will do. It will be a consideration as part of development of that strategy. Obviously, the LNRS is developed at a regional level. We're contributing to that from a Sheffield perspective, but it is a kind of regional approach, and that will be factored into the regional plan as it comes forward. We're not exactly sure on the timeframes around spatial development strategy yet, but as soon as they become clear, one of the considerations in development of that strategy will be local nature recovery, yeah.
Probably just worth adding as well, had the local nature recovery strategy been available for us to before we produced this plan, then we would have reflected that on the policies map within the local plan itself. So when we come to the first review of the plan, that's certainly something we would want to incorporate in the next version of the local plan as well.
Great, thank you very much indeed. So really helpful questions, comments, and particularly really helpful answers from the officers. Thank you for covering those points. So page 4 of item number 11, the report pack here, sets out a range of recommendations which run from A to K. There are a huge amount of recommendations here, and I'm going to ask our members happy to support the recommendations as a block. Craig has just advised me that because of the length of them, we can take them as a block. Are members happy to support those recommendations? Okay.
And I would ask for a recorded vote as well, Mr. Chair.
All votes are recorded. In which case we'll have a show of hands then. Members, can I see members? There's obviously 3 options as per always: approval, voting against or abstaining. Can I see those members who are in favour of the recommendations? Please raise your hand. For clarity, I'm just going to ask Democratic Services colleagues to check that they've got the number, but also which councillors.
I've got 8, Chair, and I've got the members, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I see members who are voting against?
Got 5, Chair.
Okay, and just for completeness, any members who are abstaining? There are none. Everyone has voted. So that vote is carried. And that will go, those recommendations mean that this will now go through to full council on the 14th of May. As everyone knows, all votes are recorded. So we'll have a further chance to discuss this on the 14th of May. Thank you, everybody. That concludes our business for today. Thank you particularly to Will, Simon and Mike for answering the questions of the presentation today. Thank you.